Good evening. Thank you. Apparently the mic is not louder than the crowd. Good conversation. They can't be. No one's there is more chicken for people that got to the end of the line and didn't have chicken. Woo! Yay, chicken! I've never had a cheer for chicken before. Yeah, thanks. All right. I don't have my Nancy, my friend. I don't have the clicker. Do it every time.
You have a clicker?
Thank you. I'm just gonna. So our friend Joe has it. I'll struggle. That's good. I'm good with struggling. Thank you all for coming. This was a good crowd. We had a lot of last-minute additions. Thank you for that. That also makes it a little difficult for us to plan food and seating. So if you love what you see and are having a great time, I want to come back again next month. The earlier they register, the better for us, for my campers. So thank you very much for that. But we are flexible and agile because we are IT people, so we will make it happen. These events couldn't be possible without these amazing people. It's not just me with the mic, it is all of these amazing people that put together a great event for you month after month, tried and true. I heard, I wasn't there, but Cloud, it's not working.
Use your inside mouth.
Yep.
You're an IT person.
Hello!
Turn it off.
Like the battery might die on me. It's on now. It's off. I'm feeling like it's a battery.
Wrap it on the table.
All right. So
Technical difficulties.
I heard Cloud Brewing was a success. It was a July event, which we don't invite a speaker to because we don't know how good attendance will be, but I think we broke our records and had over 65 people in attendance at Cloud Brewing last month, so thank you to all of you that came for that event. And if you are sitting at the table with one of these lovely, beautiful people, please say thank you for all that they do to help us out. We are beginning the conversations with these lovely people about what their plans are for next year. And if they want to remain in these chairs and these seats at this table, or if they would like to play musical chairs with me and sit in a different seat next year. If there are vacancies, I will make an announcement next month. And if you have some time in your schedule and are interested in volunteering in an amazing, fun, great organization that supports your IT community here in town, then I'd love to see you and meet with you and talk to you about how you can get involved on our board for next year. Thank you so much. In addition to our board, in addition to our board, we have a MAC, which is our advisory council. And there are CIOs, retired CIOs, and important people that help us, give us direction about speakers and programming for next year's topics. There's also room to add people to this organization. Thank you so much. Are we on? Hello. There's also room to add to this organization. So if you would like to be involved in our advisory council and join these senior level executive people in giving us guidance and direction, some of whom are in the room, Mr. Jerry and Mr. Jeff. I saw you earlier. There you are. And Ken, our newest, by the way.
I'll see a photo of Ken out there.
Ken. I love how we're so close and you can call me out in front of a room full of people. But
you're in stealth mode.
Our newest addition for the next year that can join our next meeting, but we just voted Ken in to join our MAP as well. And Rich Johnson, who's our past president, who's also here in the back of the room, quiet in stealth mode, joining us. Thank you to these people. Our VPs of programs, Jerome and Richard, have put on a great year for us, and so I commend you. These are the events that we have had. In the parentheses are the attendance that we have had. Here we are today, and this is what's upcoming. So Save the date, put it on your calendar. It's always second Thursday, but it might not always be here. Don't tell the people that work at NC State University Club, but we might be taking some field trips in the next couple of months because we have some gracious hosts that would like for us to come and see them at their space. So take a look, put it on your phone, take a picture. It will be on our website soon, live and updated, and lots of continuing great topics, speakers, and events happening for you towards the end of the year. Oh, and holiday party. Would you like to sponsor or host us? We are looking for help to figure out our date for a holiday party. As you know, December can be quite a busy month to find places to have events. We want to put on a great show. Please see anyone on our board to talk to us about helping us out on that day. New members, membership continues to grow. We're above 100. We've had a lot of people join as our 3-month membership. We're really excited. Here's some new friends that have decided to join us. I think we had 1 or 2 join this week to attend this event as well, so your name didn't make it because I actually had already written this PowerPoint presentation before we made some decisions this week. It's not live, it's not real time. Thank you, welcome. Glad to have you. Also, if you'd like to join. So some of you are guests. Our guest fee has been $35. It has stayed at $35 for a long time.
Ever.
Our cost has not remained just at $35. So we've made some changes. There are some asterisks that you will see on this slide. And after this meeting, we are going to make some adjustments to our prices. We had to vote on this. We are a nonprofit, but we are not in a position where we can go out of business by giving things away for free. So we are going to try to cover our costs in the future. You know what helps with that? Sponsors. If I had a gift card to throw your way for that, I would.
I was waiting for it.
I appreciate it. It's almost as if it was planned.
Yeah.
Our annual membership remained the same because that's really our goal. Grow membership, have the same people continue to come to these events, continue to add value, continue to grow our IT community. So you get 12 months of programs, meals, networking, everything you see here. And you get to share your seat if you can't attend, so that seat doesn't go unused for those 12 months at the low and affordable price of $195 a year, which, by the way, does not cover your cost if you actually show up 12 times for us. Quarterly membership is now $90. Basically, think of it as your guest fee times 2, buy 2, get 1 free. Who doesn't like a sale? If it is on sale and it's buy 2, get 1 free, you know who's getting it? It's a shopping cart. So, quarterly membership is, you didn't know I was a comedian, did you? The kid does not think I'm funny. So, the 3-month membership is going to be adjusted to $90 going forward. At your renewal date. So if you're already locked in at our low and affordable $60 3-month membership, then that's good until your renewal date. Guest fee for next month goes up, so this might be a great opportunistic time for those of you who are considering membership to join us as an annual member. Enough about this slide. Group membership. Tracy, State Employee Credit Union. Are you enjoying your group membership?
It is awesome.
Are you putting it to good use?
It is well worth the value, Kate.
Are you giving it as an incentive to employees that do a great job on your team and allowing them the opportunity to come and network in this
Kate, it's almost like you're reading from a script.
People that know me well know that I don't do those scripts. But this is what you can get if you work for an organization that would like to use this as a way to give back to your IT community, and depending on the topic and the speaker, send different people to different monthly events and use it as a reward and an incentive. We would love to talk to you about your corporation stepping up and joining us as a group member. All right, sponsorship. I apologize. The font on the screen might be small and hard to read. If you like more information, I will politely redirect you to our website where it is better and easier to read. I am not a great person at building PowerPoint presentations. This is a snipping tool job, so it is what it is until they find someone who can do it better. So bear with me. We have a lot of different ways that you can get involved. If your corporation has extra marketing money to spend, which is few and far between now, we realize, depending on where you are in your fiscal year, we would love to talk to you about ways that you can invest that money and get a really good return on your investment by having this amazing audience of IT professionals at your disposal that are both job seekers and people that are looking to be recognized and promoted in their careers. Thank you to the companies that may or may not be present that have sponsored us this past year. And now you've heard enough about me, from me, and you want to hear about Joe. That's why we're really here. We want to learn about ChatGPT, which is still this new and exciting, unknown technology that we know that I can't teach them about. So Dr. Joe is joining us all the way from Bucknell University, which is in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, for those of you that don't know. For those of you that have driven through Pennsylvania on Highway 15, it is a very long journey through Pennsylvania.
This is true.
But he's only new. He's only been there for a year, so he's new to Bucknell. He's joining us today. He's going to teach us a little bit. We're going to learn a little bit about how ChatGPT is going to transform and change all of our jobs and all of our lives. So please welcome Dr. Joe Wilck. Need it? All right.
But I can get you one, Joe, if you want.
This may or may not work for you. Okay, you good? You sure?
Do you want the clicker?
I'll figure it out.
That's the wrong one. So that's
So gracious in the South. He's good. Joe, you're amazing.
You got this. We believe in you. I can fumble through it. I'm going to just give you, do you need your slide for your presentation?
I think it's just not the slide pack. It's not really the check.
So how do we do it? Where's the?
Oh, yeah, I was using, oh, it's not. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
That works.
all right, that works.
Just the arrow. You good with that?
Yes.
Promise? Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, so thank you, Kate. She mentioned there was a funny mic. I didn't realize there was a funny computer. So as was mentioned, I am from Bucknell University. It's about 500 miles north on Highway 15. I've only been there a year. About 10 years ago, I actually lived in North Carolina, though. I lived in Greenville for 3 years. So I'm talking about the Pirates. I would like to kind of extend a thank you to a few people in the room here. Obviously, thank you to the board for inviting me, and Kate, but also Scott and Ken. Ken's in the back. He's hiding. Ken leads the New College Institute's Data Analytics Consortium. We meet every other week, early in the morning, on Fridays, online, and we talk about all things data or AI or IT or whatever we want to talk about that week. Scott and I are probably, along with Ken, the people that show up the most. So we've talked about everything you're going to see tonight. So if you can't catch me with a hard question, you can catch them. I also want to acknowledge a colleague of mine at Bucknell. His name is Daniel Street. He's an accounting professor, but he's actually very good with code, which is actually a very lethal combination. He and I are in the process of publications and whatnot. So some of the stuff you're going to see tonight is actually in a publication that's going into an accounting journal. I'm sorry, IT and accounting, haha. But we're going to have more papers forthcoming, and he is quite a delight as well. He's been quoted in the Wall Street Journal recently about ChatGPT. So here's what I want to talk to you about tonight, and I think I was oversold a little bit by Kate. I appreciate that, but hopefully I'm not going to solve all your problems. I can tell you that right now. But I'm going to start off kind of big picture, so 10,000-foot view, and then I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper on a few things. And some of this stuff is going to be based on kind of just what I'm working on. And keep in mind that I'm an academic, so I'm teaching this to the students, If you think I'm way off base here, please let me know so I don't teach this to the students, because you're the ones hiring my students, or hiring students that are coming from programs similar to mine. So I would like to start with, what is generative AI, okay? Because you've probably been hearing that phrase a lot, and you might not quite understand, well, why is this not just AI? What's the generative part? Well, the generative part means it's generating something. Generating image, generating words, which is what ChatGPT does, generating other types of media. That's the generative part. And this is done through, learning patterns and different structures, and, using the training data and whatnot, and then producing a result. So, for example, if you had 1 million pictures of cars and you trained an AI model on how to draw a car, it would probably draw a really good car, because it's only been trained on how to draw cars. And so if you get 1 million pictures, it can do that. Historical context, AI has been studied, I would argue, for decades. Some people would argue for centuries. There's some books that talk about computing that's actually been done for hundreds of years. I won't get into that. However, I would say that, why is this coming about now? 2 reasons. One, autoencoders. You don't need to know about those, but it's a special type of modeling that has really advanced in the last 20 years. Okay? For those of you who do Kaggle competitions or the Netflix competition, if you've heard of that, autoencoders is what won those competitions. The second reason is because of computing. Computing has obviously gotten cheaper and faster and better, and add those 2 things together, you now have some really significant models. Now, where have you seen generative AI, and as IT professionals, why are you scared about it? Maybe it's keeping you up at night. I think deepfakes are probably the most scary thing, perhaps in your field, when you think about generative AI. And it kind of makes me scared a little bit as well, because there's actually a lot of video of me out on YouTube. Because of COVID, I had to teach online classes. And now I'm thinking, one of my smart students, one of these days, is going to create a video of me saying whatever they want me to say. And it's going to look very realistic. So I might need a red dot soon. Now, some frameworks. There's a lot of organizations and individuals out there studying, what about the ethical part of this? What about the responsibility part of this? And I know, Scott, you're working in this area. The key words, perhaps, to search for this, because I'm not going to dive into that too much tonight, the phrases that you might want to look for are called trustworthy AI or responsible AI. Okay, let's see if this works. All right, good. Okay, so diving in a little bit deeper. So a subset of generative AI, because that's all things that can be generated, would be large language models. Okay, so large language models, they generate text. Okay, and so it's artificial intelligence. It's using neural networks. We're going to talk specifically about ChatGPT, but you can think about, they have a corpus. I'll talk to you more about that one in a second. But a long list of articles and documents, and you put that into a neural network, millions and millions of dollars put into this. You let it work on a cloud service. It runs that neural network for a long time, and now it has a really strong model. There was reinforcement as well, so telling it, yes, this is correct, or no, this is wrong. If it's correct, the reinforcement part, it kind of rewards that. So then, like you're trying to train your dog to fetch, you reward it when it comes back to you with the toy. You don't reward it when it doesn't. So that's the kind of thing, you're reinforcing that. There's some probability involved, so it's not always going to give you the same answer. But this is a large language model, and that's kind of the background for how it's built. Now, some history here. This has actually been conceived also decades ago. In fact, there's papers from the 1950s that actually articulate how this would work. Unfortunately, they didn't have autoencoders back then, and they didn't have the computing that we have back then. Recursive neural networks were obviously a precursor to this. Now, there's a couple of major model types out there, and I'm not going to bore you with all the gory details, But the ones that came out earlier, so this would have been a few years ago, you might have heard of BERT, so that's bidirectional. GPT, hence the ChatGPT, that's unidirectional. Okay, so that was kind of the added technology that was added with respect to the large language models. So those are a couple of kind of key terminology things that I wanted to mention. Now I want to talk a little bit about ChatGPT and where it comes from. So ChatGPT entered our life, at least for most of us, in November of 2022. So it's not even, 9 months old yet? Ken actually, like on a drop, he'll tell you exactly how many days old it is.
9 months and 10 days.
There you go. he's all over it. So it was developed by OpenAI. OpenAI started as a nonprofit. It is now a restricted for-profit organization, and obviously they have $10 billion at least from Microsoft that's been invested. So they're obviously now a for-profit arm of Microsoft, essentially. They surpassed 100 million users within 2 months, which means that they were adopted faster than the iPhone. Okay, so ChatGPT had 100 million users, faster than any other technology ever in the history of the world. Now, these last 2 bullets I don't agree with. These are from March. Okay, in March of 2023, Glassdoor, through one of their arms called Fishbowl, they said that 30% of professionals had used ChatGPT. Monster.com said that 50% of workers had used it. I think those numbers are heavily inflated. And the reason I think that is because I talk to people in my family, many of which work in the medical field, and they had never heard. So, and the medical field is like 20% of at least the American workforce. So I'm thinking there's no way we're hitting these numbers. So I think these are a little inflated, but what it does speak to, though, is there are still a lot of people using it. The 100 million, the third bullet point I agree with, the last 2 I don't. So there's still a lot of people using ChatGPT, and it kind of went through a very big sweeping phase because it came out right around the holidays, and it was still generating a whole lot of buzz all the way through today.
Can we ask the room who's used it?
Yes. So Kate wants to know who's used ChatGPT. Woo.
But we're an IT group, so
We're IT
I mean, we're early adopters.
How many of you have used Google's Bard? How many of you still use Google's Bard? Oh, we'll talk more about Google Bard in a second. So I was trying to be funny.
What's pretty funny.
So technical
I'm a
details.
hard act to follow.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. The technical details. It was so the GPT part stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. That sounds like the next Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But the 3 and the 4 are important here. So the 3, that signifies that it was trained initially in 2020. Now, ChatGPT advertises that they have 3.5. What that indicates is during 2021, they refined the output of the GPT-3 and they added in some additional corpus, or documents, to kind of strengthen it to 2021. Okay. And so when you use ChatGPT, at least the free version, it will specify this is only good through September 2021. Now, ChatGPT-4, that's the paid version, that came out in March, and that actually was good through about the end of 2022. Now, this number here in the last slide, the estimated amount of money spent to build it, that is an estimate. They haven't really officially come out and said how much computing time did they use to build the model. We know they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day just to run it for users, but how much did they spend in computing time to actually build GPT-3? The estimate that I've seen is somewhere between 5 and 10 million. And that was obviously using Microsoft. Again, there's that partnership there that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so getting a little bit more into the details. How is it trained? So what is the corpus? This is the most public information we know about it. There is a paper that was written, and it's on archive, so this is open source, if you will. The people who put together GPT-3, they published a paper. Now, they have not published a paper on 3.5 or 4, so we don't have the details on those as specific as we do for 3, but you can see the different data sets that they used in the corpus. They used the common crawl of the internet, but it was filtered. What that means by filter, by the way, is if you think, have any of you heard of Reddit?
Yeah.
Okay, a few people. Basically, things that have been upvoted had a more likely chance of being included than something that hadn't had any votes. So, common crawl of the internet had the largest amount of tokens, if you will, or content. Then web text 2. Web text 2, you can think of those as websites that actually have some validity to them. Books 1 would be your classics, Dickens, Shakespeare. Books 2 would be your self-published books, so think politicians. Wikipedia was assumed to be the most reliable source of everything in the corpus.
But it has the least weight.
Right, it has the least weight. And that's because it's the smallest. You know, Wikipedia, if you actually printed it, it would just basically be the encyclopedia, it's actually not that big. So that's why it has the smallest weight. But this is a two-weighted system because it's a neural network. Look at the epochs. How much of it was part of, how many times did they go back to it when it was being trained? Wikipedia is the largest, followed by web text 2, so those websites that you have some trust in, followed by books 1, which are the, the classics. Then basically common crawl of the internet and self-published books were the least weighted in terms of how many times we go back to it. So this weight is based on just the amount of words. This is really the weight of how it was being made, okay?
Is that the number of times it was iterated? What is that 3.4 stand for?
Well, it's 3.4 for 300 billion tokens. So they like are reusing some of this content. So like for example, the Wikipedia is 3 billion tokens, but that means that they would have been going back to Wikipedia hundreds and hundreds of times, right? So they're basically like refining it even with their own content. So it's like they're sampling from the same pool twice. Does that make sense? Or maybe even more than twice, actually hundreds of times. Did that answer your question?
Sort of. I'm just wondering, what is that epoch elapsed? That means the amount of time elapsed between refreshes?
So an epoch is part of a neural network. So it's like but you can think of it as like how many times they're going to go back and sample from that pool, if you will. So there's a 3.4 weight of going back to Wikipedia, but only a 0.4 weight to go into books 2, for example.
Okay. Should those weights add up to something?
No.
Like a fraction?
It's basically trying to give you kind of like just kind of a relative understanding of what it is. Thank you. Yes.
So, from my understanding, you say that the 3.4 is how many times it refers back to the Wikipedia, correct?
Again, relative to the others.
Yeah.
Okay, so it obviously went back to Wikipedia millions of times, but relative to the others.
So, does that mean that the common crawl is more accurate data if it's not going back to it?
No, it means that they recognized that it was less accurate, but they still wanted to include it because it's part of language. And also you have to remember that ChatGPT, it's not just about stating facts, it's also about stating creativity and having common knowledge. So there's some thoughts there too.
What metric is it using to determine like the accuracy?
Oh, honestly, I don't even know if that was part of it. I honestly think that the builders of it, they really weren't too concerned about accuracy, except for in the reinforcement stage. So an analogy would be, I'm sure you've gone to like a website, you've logged in and they're like, please click the pictures that are stoplights.
Yeah.
They did stuff like that, but if you were asking it something that's a little bit more obscure, they didn't care too much about the accuracy there because they assumed that Wikipedia would be more accurate than this, than this, than this.
And there was no circumstance in which it would like cross-reference another source. Like, let's say I found something from Wikipedia and then cross-reference the common.
Well, see, now remember, it's the neural network, so it's not necessarily trying to cross-reference. It's just kind of like probabilistically, which one did it go to at that instant in the neural network?
This is just training.
Yeah, this is just in the training phase.
But
Yes.
the weightage would be where it's actually cross-referenced, right? Because it says, why not log? The weightage is where it would probably cross-reference. Hey, I got this information from common, but I got it 60% of the time, but I got it only 3% of the time in Wikipedia. So it has some sort of built-in, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing to mention is this is for GPT-3. ChatGPT is built on 3.5, which they have not released any information on, and 4, which they have not released any information on. So this is, historical at this point. We don't even really know what they're currently using.
It works the way your brain does.
Yeah.
Think about the synapses in the brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are, or you're good at the things that you repeatedly do.
Right.
So it's pulling information essentially from those same places, that same neural pathway, if you will, every time.
You talked about trust earlier with
Mhm.
context too. Does it have, does the neural network have built-in smarts to often check for trust, or is it a one-time?
The neural network itself, there's the reinforcement learning is supposedly handling that.
Right.
And so by the reinforcement learning, think about like a user using ChatGPT, and they actually, when you use ChatGPT, it says, hey, give us a thumbs up if you like this, if you thought this response was good, give us a thumbs down if you think it's bad. That's part of it. So if they're actually using that, and again, we don't know because they won't actually tell us, but I assume they are, then that's going to help with the increased understanding of something, whatever that context is. But you could also have bad actors too. You could have somebody using ChatGPT and saying, oh, this was a horrible answer, but I'm going to give it a thumbs up anyway, So that's another issue as well. I'm sorry, this is very wordy. I think I am being recorded though. So just a little bit of history, because it seems like every week there's something new. And so I tried to put 9 months and 10 days in one slide. ChatGPT did open up with a paid subscription in March. Originally, that paid subscription, you still only were allowed to ask it 25 questions every 3 hours. And when it cracked out on you, that counted as one of your questions. Don't ask me how I know. But it put you at the front of the line for 3. Okay, because there was a time where it was actually so clogged, it was hitting its capacity limit. But it put you at the front of the line for using 3. By the way, that's now up to 50 questions. I suspect it's going to go back down to 25 once the kids are back in school and using it for their homework. We're going to talk about this more, but ChatGPT-4 is very good at standardized tests. So think multiple choice tests. It's very good at those. We're going to talk more about that. Bing Chat from Microsoft came out. This is, it's my understanding it's only available using Edge. I don't know who uses that. If anybody from here works at Microsoft, I apologize. Supposedly, it uses GPT-4, but based on my usage of it, I suspect it throttles the use based off of the capacity. So I think sometimes it's using 4, sometimes it's using 3. But the benefit of Bing Chat, so this is actually a big benefit, is it also uses internet search. So where ChatGPT doesn't have any connection to the internet to actually search it to answer a question, if you ask Bing Chat, who is Joe Wilck, it'll actually look me up on the internet and find my LinkedIn and say, is this who you're looking for? Whereas ChatGPT will say, I cannot comment, it'll have some disclaimer, like I cannot comment on an individual that's not, famous. Say,
Yes.
I'm doing my best not to be famous. Now, Google Bard also came out in March 2023. What Google Bard is doing differently though, is they're offering you 3 drafts. Now, it's assumed that the first draft is their primary answer, but they actually offer 2 other drafts for a question. Now, if it's a factual question that you're asking, it might not really be that different. But if you ask Google Bard a more creative question like, hey, can you write me a haiku about, lights? It might actually give you 3 different answers, so 3 different choices to choose from. Other organizations are working on LLMs. Scott and I, during dinner, were talking. He just came back from the conference where everybody's pitching their LLM. We know Amazon's working on one. We know Value, if I mispronounce these, I apologize, is working on one. Bloomberg, they've come out and said they're working on one, but I think that's probably going to be internal for their financial stuff. Obviously, Google's Bard, another Chinese firm. Hugging Face, that one is very interesting, and I'll name drop them here. I've casually asked some of my industry friends, and the ones that are building their own and trying to keep it internal, so lock out outside distractions, they're exploring Hugging Face right now. That's the one that they're looking at closely. And Meta has their own. I'm sure there are many others, but these are the ones that I thought were most prevalent to mention. Okay, so I'm doing horrible on time, but here are the 3 deeper dives that I want to dive into. I want to talk about building an LLM with just a single laptop. And I want to talk about why that's important to me. I also want to talk about how smart are LLMs. Obviously, that was probably the first thing all of us did with an LLM is we tried to use it to see if it could actually answer some silly question. And we found out that, oh, we can't. And we were like, oh, it's not as smart as we could. And then the last thing was, how can we properly use it as professionals? If you're coaching a young professional, or for me, coaching some students, how can I encourage them to use this properly? A couple of terms, and these actually came up at dinner as well. Jailbreak, this is when you use ChatGPT and it has rules. It's not supposed to answer questions like, how do I build a bomb? But if you ask the questions in creative ways and you're persistent, it will tell you how to build a bomb. I don't recommend asking it that, though. I'm sure people are watching me. Hallucination is when it makes up something and it just goes on and on. Now, we kind of all know that ChatGPT is doing this, but where it gets a little scary, you can actually get it to make up things about people. And I think that's a little scary. You could have it actually say something that's completely wrong about someone, completely unethical, negative, that sort of thing. And that's kind of scary. So those are 2 terms that are now being thrown around, jailbreak and hallucination. So I do want to open up to some of my biases and my opinions about ChatGPT. And keep in mind, I come from academia. So there's a lot coming out with the education community. And I'm at a liberal arts school, and I come from a professional background, so engineering, and now I'm in a management school. So I come at it from a different angle. My argument to my colleagues is, look, these students are going to get jobs where LLMs exist. So they need to know at least how to use them properly. That's the world they're entering. The other thing that we all know, at least in academia, we know that LLMs are really good at multiple choice tests. It can pass the bar exam. It can pass the AP exam. It can do well in the SATs. Those are all multiple choice. And let's think about why that is. Well, the way to do really well at a multiple choice exam is to memorize the textbook. And guess what? ChatGPT not only memorized the textbook, but it memorized it over and over and over again. The other thing I would argue to my education friends is we actually have adopted technology as it's come about. If you talk to people who've been teaching for over 30 years, and there are still a few around, they remember students actually starting to use Microsoft Word, because that came out in the 90s. About, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, a lot of universities now have licenses to Grammarly. I don't know if you've heard of Grammarly, but they got a lot of commercials out there now. But it's basically a way to check your grammar in any kind of document, whether it's an email or a report. Microsoft Word also has that feature now as well. And then universities, and now even my kids' middle school, they're using learning management systems. So think everything from the class is now on the internet. Their notes, videos, homework assignments, grades, everything's online. Universities have adopted all these things. So we continue to adopt technology. I kind of see LLMs as just another technology. The other thing that I've come to realize, because I try to talk to my colleagues that are in industry and some of my former students, they are starting to build their own. And actually, the first person that told me this works for the government. I won't tell you where. But they were like, yeah, we're definitely building our own. We're all over this. But they're going to keep it internal. They're going to keep it shut off from the internet so that nobody can get to it. At least they hope. I would also argue, though, and this is why it's important to kind of keep going back and checking, ChatGPT continues to evolve. In the last, 4 months, they've added plugins. So if you have the paid version, $20 a month plus taxes, they have plugins and apps. And you also have the ability now to analyze files, and you can upload the files and say, analyze this for blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
I heard about an event yesterday that a lot of governance organizations, board of directors, they often have a 300 to 800 page binder that they have to study to prepare for like a week before their monthly board meetings. That some of them are developing their own internal systems to upload all that content as a purpose and just give them like an executive 1 or 2 page summary so they don't have to read it all.
Right. Yeah. And in a former life, that was like the intelligence briefing, and it's like, write this in 100 words or less. Yeah. But exactly. One of the plugins, I just want to mention this, we talked about this, and I'm going to talk about this briefly again. I don't know, how many of you have heard of Wolfram Alpha? Okay, so Wolfram Alpha is a website that does math. And when I say math, I'm talking calculus, okay? One of the plugins for ChatGPT is Wolfram Alpha. It can now do calculus. I did test it though, so we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so I got to quickly go through some of this, but one of the things I want to do with my students is I want them to build their own large language model. I want them to understand the process so that when they get out into the workforce, they at least understand kind of the steps. There is a GitHub page, and it's called NanoGPT, and you can essentially build a large language model on a laptop. There's a lot of other examples, but I picked this one because it's small, but the one I really want to investigate next is Hugging Face. And so that's my next chore, but I haven't done that yet. The main reason, though, that I picked NanoGPT is the person who developed it, he actually works for OpenAI, Andrej Karpathy, and he's a Stanford-trained computer scientist, and so he put this out there for everyone to use. And so the example that he shared was basically, he put a few hundred lines of Shakespeare poetry, and he said, use this and build baby Shakespeare, and then it will talk back to you in Elizabethan. And so my accounting friend and I said, hey, this sounds fun, so let's do it. So here are some of the packages that you would have to install. Obviously, this is in Python, by the way. So you have to already have Python installed, but there's a few packages that you have to install. And then, of course, you have to get the corpus, which in this case was a few hundred lines of Shakespeare. And you essentially run it. But you have a preparation file that you have to run. And so this builds the model. And then you have to train the model. Okay, so you have to build the model, then train it. And these are separate commands. And depending on the type of computer you have, and this is why the single laptop thing is important, depending on the type of computer you have, this training model is going to be different. So for me, for example, I have a GPU, CUDA enabled, but some folks have like an Apple, some folks have an M1, etc. So you're going to have to change the command line prompt here depending on the computer. And then once your model is then trained, then you can actually prompt it, okay? And you can give it a sentence that's in Elizabethan and then see what its response is. So that's baby Shakespeare. I mentioned I worked with an accountant, so we built baby IRS. We scraped the IRS website. It was not pretty. I'm going to show you something that we did with the Security Plus exam in a minute. It did not come out as well either. When I told my daughter, my oldest daughter, she's 12, what I was doing, she was not interested at all. And then I told her if I had a text file of Harry Potter, I could build Baby Harry. Then she got interested. But then once I started speaking about encoders, she stopped. Interested. There is one thing that I'm not going to mention here, though, and this would perhaps require more than just a laptop. The NanoGPT does include, the GitHub does include a way to add this on top of GPT-2, which came out before 2020. But the reason this is going to be useful is it would actually give you complete sentences, because you're going to see in a moment that we're not going to get complete sentences out of this. So it's not as impressive as I would like. So it's not impressive, primarily because I used the security, I was thinking about Security Plus, and I was thinking about some parameters and other things. So I went to the NIST website, the government website, and I downloaded a lot of documentation, and I converted it to text. It's at about approximately 100,000 lines of text, and I essentially let it run on my computer, my CUDA-enabled computer for an hour, and then I had trouble with the encodings, and I was like, really? And you don't reach this error until you prompt it, which means that I did all this work and then I get the error. And students are going to hate that. And I noticed that Andre, in his code, he actually left himself a note, and this is hilarious because we do the same thing. He's a famous computer scientist. He left himself a note. It says, to want to make this more general, 2 arbitrary encoder-decoder schemes. So he does the same thing I do. He leaves himself notes and then doesn't go back to fix it. So here's my output. I asked it, what is cybersecurity? Okay, so I did get it to work. But as you can see, it's a bunch of gibberish. It gives me a few words. Now here's why this happened. Number one, it was only trained on this documentation, so it wasn't trained on any kind of normal language. It was all a bunch of NIST documents. The other thing to keep in mind is that it's trained on tokens, and tokens are not words. Tokens are 5 or 6 characters, so that could be a small word, but it's not a full word. And so, as you can see, it's kind of all over the place. It's not clean. So definitely need to get some work done here. Likely need to add in the GP2 part so it can actually complete things in paragraphs and sentences and words. One of the things that I thought was hilarious is you'll notice here it has the word page in all caps because at the bottom of all of the NIST documentation was page and then the number. So it found that token and it arbitrarily put it right here. By the way, the spacing is what it provided. So notice all the weird spacing as well. So clearly it has some work to do. I don't think students are going to find this interesting, but this is where my mind is headed. I want to train my students to build their own large language model because I know organizations, that's what they're doing. They're building their own. Why are they building their own? Because of many reasons, one of which is if they can build their own, they can keep out bad actors. If they build their own, when someone retires, they can perhaps retain some of their knowledge, or at least ask them a question even though they don't work there anymore, that sort of thing. So that leads me to my next kind of deep dive, which is how smart are these LLMs? So I did check with the Security Plus exam. So these are some well-known test questions, if you will. And I did cheat a little bit, though. Instead of asking it the multiple choice version of the question, I rephrased the question so that it was just a question. Okay, so if it had 4 or 5 options, it still would have had to have given me the answer without me giving it all the options. Okay, it passes. So ChatGPT 4 passes, 3.5 passes, and Bard passes. Now, I have an asterisk there for Bard because it allows it to use the internet. And for the questions I was pulling for Security Plus, some of them are actually almost verbatim online. So I think some of them Bard actually just found in its corpus and just gave me the reference. So I don't know if that's really cheating or not, but it was able to look them up. These are not impressive scores, though, by the way, but I think if I'd actually allowed it to be multiple choice, we would have been looking at 95s. Okay, like they would have gotten almost all of them right. So where did it struggle? Okay, and so this gets to some of the questions I got before dinner about, well, I heard it did well on the health stats. I heard it did well on this and that. Well, that's because by not asking the multiple choice questions, it did occasionally get the frameworks wrong. So it would answer like, have you ever asked your child or someone a question and they actually answered it beautifully, but it just wasn't for the right question? It does that sometimes. And so because it pulled the wrong framework, okay? And then it just started hallucinating on that framework. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm going to talk more about this later, but there's this term called prompt engineering where, as professionals, we know we can ask a clarification question. Now, for taking this test, I did not ask any clarification questions, but in reality, you would. You could say, wait a minute, did you think about this framework? Then it would have answered it correctly because it would have reset it and prompted it correctly. So there's some of that going on as well.
And what you said, a field now, I believe there are jobs for prompt engineers.
Okay, yes. So there's jobs for prompt engineers. I'm glad you mentioned this because this is triggering something else I want to say. So some companies are now advertising jobs for prompt engineers. Unfortunately, for those people who want to go into that line of work, ChatGPT has one-upped them, and so the new paid version of ChatGPT actually gives you prompts to choose from. So ChatGPT has already taken that job away, unfortunately. By the way, that just rolled out in the last 2 weeks. The prompts from GPT, yeah.
Now, when you were making the LLMs, did you use ChatGPT in order to assist with it, or did you just do it all yourself?
No, I used the Nano GPT framework. Now, one of the tokens, not tokens, one or two of the packages came from OpenAI.
Okay.
So it's some of their same modeling, and I don't want to do this in my hands, but it's some of their same modeling. Okay, and Hugging Face was also one of them. But the reason it's pulling from Hugging Face is because there's a couple of data sets in Hugging Face that I didn't use, but some of the samples used to kind of show you how this could work. But yeah, I just kind of followed the GitHub, and then I did Baby IRS just by using my own scrape of that website, and then I did the NIST stuff as well. Yes?
I think maybe I'm getting the same question as Steve. Did you generate the Python code manually?
No.
Or did you use?
I used what was on the GitHub, which is the Nano GPT.
Okay.
So there was code on the
those packages. My question is, when you start using those packages and you call them, right? ChatGPT creates those lines of code as well. Yeah, I think the question was.
Oh, that's a good question. I did not. So it's my understanding that code was written by Andre. Only thing I did was change like where the file was located on my computer and the different command line. Like I did not adjust the code at all, except for to change the name of it. But I'm of the impression that the code was made by Andre. Now, if he had used ChatGPT to make the code, he did not cite it as such, although he may have. Yes?
Earlier you talked about using AI in like a government, type area. Isn't that, on a security standpoint, doesn't that lead to the possibility of compromise? Because if you let's say your data set gets compromised, the answers you might be getting, you might think are trained off of, what you were training on, but that was compromised, and now you're getting answers that you didn't realize.
Exactly. Yeah, there's definitely a concern there. And there's, I overheard someone say, but there's going to be like false negatives and false positives. Like there's going to be error on both sides of that. That's excellent point. I see a hand over here. So two more topics about how smart it is, and then I'll go to my last deep dive. So my previous life, I taught a lot in engineering, and so I taught a lot of courses in engineering economics, so like thousands of students, and then engineering management. And for engineering economics, that's a link kind of to applying, accounting and time value of money principles to the finances behind an engineering project. And there's some math to it, but it's not like calculus-based math. And so I wanted to see how well ChatGPT and the like would do with that sort of a problem. And they're not all multiple choice. So in this case, test 1, test 2, and test 3 were open-ended math problems, essentially. The final exam was multiple choice then. But at this point, I did allow it to use Wolfram Alpha, okay, so the math plugin. And what I want to point out here, because I know there's a lot of numbers on the screen, I have my student average on the left, okay, so my average student is like about an 80%. The basic ChatGPT fails my class and is probably one of my worst students ever, okay, because if a student gets a 46 on my first test, I'm advising them to drop my class. But what's really hilarious here is ChatGPT 4, which came out like 3 months later, now passes my class. I mean, not glowingly, but that's like the biggest improvement ever. You go from being my worst student to passing in 3 months. What's weird though is with Wolfram Alpha, it actually didn't do as well as you would have thought. And I think part of that is because when you use the plugins on ChatGPT, there's like a way, and I changed the parameters here, but in the first column here, this was me forcing it to use Wolfram Alpha. In this column, this is me saying you can use it, you don't have to, okay? And unfortunately, Bing Chat and Bard, they still aren't as strong as ChatGPT. Uh-oh. Let's see how quickly we can.
What was that? Oh.
Good. Okay, is that my 5-minute warning? Yeah.
Unintentional.
Another topic, engineering management. There's actually a certification in engineering management. And so I actually got some practice questions from that certification. All of these were multiple choice. Oh, wow. And you'll notice that it did really well. But that's because it's multiple choice. That's my argument. It's because it's multiple choice. One other comment though, remember Bing Chat is based off of ChatGPT. ChatGPT 4, it dominates GPT 3.5 and Bing Chat. What I mean by that is every question GPT 3.5 got correct, and every question Bing Chat got correct, so did ChatGPT 4. And it got some additional ones correct as well, so it dominates. It's as good as them plus a little bit better, okay? Whereas Bard, what was weird about Bard is there was actually a few questions that it got correct that ChatGPT 4 did not get correct, but then there were some easy ones that it missed. It was kind of strange.
Is there a pattern of that, like leadership is low, ops and supply chain is low?
The reason it missed the ops and supply chain is there was a couple of math questions that it got hosed on. The leadership, this is going to sound bad, and this is actually true for the previous, I just didn't break it out by subject. Believe it or not, it's really poor ethics.
Sure.
No, I'm serious. I asked the technical questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, have any of you heard of the trolley problem?
Yeah.
It fails the basic trolley problem questions, which is kind of cool. I'm not worried about ChatGPT driving a car, but I don't So this is kind of a summary here, real quick. It's strong in multiple choice. I've also, the nice thing is it will show its work. And in looking at its work and reading through it, it actually knows how to use process of elimination. So it'll say something like, A is eliminated because of this, B is eliminated because of this, D is eliminated because of this, thus it must be C. So where it fails to perform well is in multiple step questions. So think some of those mathematical questions. But here's the catch. Students don't do well at these either. And neither do humans. So these sequential questions with multiple steps are kind of scary as well. I was asked this at dinner. If I was advising a faculty colleague, I would tell them not to use multiple choice tests unless they're going to do it on paper and they can't use a computer or their phone. The minute you allow them to use a computer, multiple choice tests should be thrown out. Now, I know I'm at time. Can I get some grace here?
100%.
Okay. I do want to talk about one quick last deep dive. I want to talk about kind of professionally what we should be teaching students and also our young professionals that work with us. So how should we use ChatGPT professionally? So a lot of this work was done in collaboration, talking with Ken and Scott, but also my colleague Daniel, who's a CPA. And one of them is develop effective prompts. So we talked about that earlier. But what is an effective prompt? Okay, an effective prompt needs to provide appropriate context. It needs to be specific, and it needs to explain ambiguous terms. I was mentioning to someone earlier today that the word trust. Most people, when they hear the word trust, they think, oh, do I trust my friend to borrow my lawnmower and bring it back? But if you talk to a lawyer or an accountant, they might think trust is like setting up a will or something for your family. So you might want to explain that term if you ask it a question about trust. Also, it now offers these sample prompts. So that's also another thing you can use, just a sample prompt. Something to also think about, you can actually give it a little bit more detail. You can tell it, hey, I'm going to give you 3 bullet points. By the way, the first bullet point is the most important. The second one is the second most important, so forth and so on. Because it doesn't have any critical thinking. And this is from Ken. It doesn't have any critical thinking. So you have to kind of give it this knowledge. Humans, we naturally know. You always put your best foot forward. You always put your first argument in bullet point 1. ChatGPT doesn't know that. Also, understand its interpretation of something. It has this kind of thing where it appears to be correct, but then under the surface, it's not. My master's advisor, he told me his interpretation of ChatGPT is it's 90% accurate, but 100% confident. And that's really scary. They do show their work, though. But here's an example. In the United States, and I haven't tested this because I haven't traveled outside the country. In the United States, ChatGPT defaults to American date format. So month, day, year. If I gave it an obvious European date format and I asked it a question about Europe, it still interprets it wrong. And in some cases, it's like, obviously, October 15th. How do you mess that up? Because there's no 15th month, but it's messed it up. So understand its interpretation of what you're asking it. You all know this, preaching to the choir, no private, sensitive, or proprietary information. It's definitely been leaked. I'm sure it's been hacked. And they're also using your information. So we talked about the up arrow and giving it the thumbs up. It's obviously using reinforcement learning. It's definitely tracking. Scott told me this is his favorite slide. This is something that I deal with a lot as a teacher. I will admit one of these is correct, but I could have put 4 more here that were wrong as well. This is in the middle of a long list of computations. Okay, so this was just one line. And I was like, how in the world? It's not a calculator. It's a language model. It's randomly, usually right, but not always, punching out the next digit. For those of you who are very curious, it's the bottom one that is correct. But what's really sad here is if you take the left-hand side of the equation, copy and paste it into Google, correct answer every time. But not Google Bard, just Google. It's not the best for factual information. It's been designed to talk to us, like a human would and have conversation. It's creative. It doesn't articulate when it's conveying facts versus being creative. We don't know. It's like whatever mood it's in, I guess. So that means you have to trust but verify. And again, a quote from Scott, which you are actually giving this to someone else, but you didn't put a name to it.
Yeah, I don't remember where I got it from, but I like it.
But LLMs are large language models, not truth models. And it also does not provide accurate references. As mentioned to me at dinner, and Ken and I talked about this, there was a legal case where a lawyer used this, and it made up cases, and they put it in the brief, they didn't verify, and then of course now they're in trouble. But my favorite story about references, in my field of operations research, there's a gentleman named Warren Powell, he's a retired Princeton professor, He's written a lot of books and articles. He asked ChatGPT for references for his field. It actually had his name, it had the right journal, made up the article, made up the volume, the issue, and the page number, and he was like, I should have written that paper. So it got the name right, the journal right, but then it just makes up the rest, so does not provide accurate references. But Bing Chat actually overcomes this a little bit because Bing Chat will give you links, okay? So that could be a way to kind of oversample this. You could use Bing Chat. It does know more about prominent topics, and this is obviously based off of its corpus. Its corpus is wide, and it goes back to it a number of times. So, for example, it correctly knew the namesake of NC State's College of Management. It did not know the namesake of Bucknell's College of Management, and part of that is because Bucknell's College of Management is really young; it's only a few years old, and Kenneth Freeman did not provide sponsorship money until 2020 or so. So it's just not enough in the corpus. Whereas Lonnie Poole, this happened decades ago, from what I understand, so it's been a while. Kenneth Freeman, by the way, I met him, great guy, so he got a kick out of this. Break down complex tasks into smaller subtasks. So imagine it's like an intern, okay? You're not going to tell it to do something and say, come back in 2 weeks. No. Break it down to smaller tasks, come back. From a publishing standpoint, some of the articles you're reading, they are saying you're accountable, okay? So if you use this, you're still accountable for what it produces as if it's you need to be the editor as the human. So again, similar to tools like using word processors and Grammarly. Understand its boundaries. So, as I said before, it was trained through September 2021. It can't help you on 2022's taxes. The other thing that's interesting, humans, we learn things kind of in a spiraled way. So like you learn a little bit about math in elementary school, a little bit more, a little bit complex in middle school, so forth and so on. ChatGPT learned everything all at once, which means that it doesn't understand when something is superseded. So a regulation that came out in, say, 2010 that superseded 2008, it might actually cite the 2008 and not realize, oh wait, 2010 superseded this, I need to forget 2008. It doesn't think like we do. It didn't learn that. So I'm winding down, only a few minutes late. So what am I working on? Building a local internal LLM. I know organizations are doing it. I want my students to be ready to do that. I'm looking for good test cases. Whether I use an GPT or something else, that's fine. But I am looking for those. If you have ideas, please let me know. I am looking at other ways to incorporate other tools, particularly as related to your field, more like malware and stuff like that. I think that's of interest as well. I am curious about the ethical and business considerations. I think there's going to be some law issues here as well. My guess is Europe is going to lead the way on this, just because with the right to be forgotten, they were ahead of the game on that one. And again, I'm still very curious about the test cases for educational purposes. Maybe Shakespeare is fun. I think maybe Harry Potter would be better, considering today's college audience. Thank you, and I leave you with this quote. Sorry, you're about to give me crap. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, which obviously ChatGPT, he said, I can't believe he said this. He said, ChatGPT is impressive, but it's not robust. And I would agree with that. So, thank you.
Thank you for our awesome audience. If you have other questions, please find Joe or his friends, Scott and Ken, before leaving. Thank you for coming all this way. I think North Carolina nearby somewhere you said was home, or family, or you used to live, or Virginia's nearby and family, so thank you for coming. It's good to have an out-of-town guest. If you like what you saw and heard and made some friends, we'd love to see you again next month. Second Thursday, Red Hat, topic.
Enterprise monitoring observations. Observation.
Yeah.
Know your environment.
So we will continue to educate and network. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you.